I'm so glad to be with all of you, and Jennifer alluded to this, we all have a grief story, and while we don't know what each other is experiencing, I do often find that those paths are on a parallel course. But one thing I do know is that it is good to be together. Today I'm going to share part of my own story, and then we're going to talk about a year of firsts and just some things that I worked through personally, but also some things that I have found comfort in from Scripture, and just the things I have learned over the years when it comes to processing my grief. I want to start off with a quote. It comes from a small little book by C.S. Lewis. If any of you know who C.S. Lewis is, he wrote, famously known for the Narnia series, Lion, the Witch, and Wardrobe, all that. But he wrote a lot of other books as well. And this is one he wrote after he had lost his wife, called A Grief Observed. He says this: "No one ever told me that grief felt so like fear. I am not afraid, but the sensation is like being afraid. The same fluttering in the stomach, the same restlessness, the yawning. I keep on swallowing. At other times, it feels like being mildly drunk or concussed. There is a sort of invisible blanket between the world and me. I find it hard to take in what anyone says, or perhaps hard to want to take it in. It's so uninteresting, yet I want the others to be about me. I dread the moments when the house is empty. If only they would talk to one another and not to me. I've plenty of what are called resources. People get over things. Come, I shan't do badly. One is ashamed to listen to this voice, but it seems for a little to be making out a good case. Then comes a sudden jab of red-hot memory, and all of this common sense vanishes like an ant in the mouth of a furnace." That's from the opening pages of the book, and I think it describes grief so well. One minute you think maybe you're making some progress, and the very next, a sudden jab of red-hot memory. Well, today I want to talk to you about something that we all experience in grief, and that's a year of firsts. The first holidays, the first birthdays, the first anniversaries, all without the person we love. And honestly, I think these moments can feel overwhelming, like fresh reminders of the loss. So let me just tell you a little bit about myself and my story. I come from a pretty big family. Mom, dad, 5 of us kids. Along the way, throw in some dogs, some cats, some fish, whatever other critters I picked up along the way and brought home, which I did that often growing up. Well, my family was always pretty close. And of course, like any family, we had those moments where things weren't so smooth, but that's okay. The one thing I've always been thankful for in my family is that we did not see all the breaks that many families do experience and see. My dad was a hard worker. He taught me the meaning of work ethic, almost to a point of overwork, but he definitely taught me how to work hard. He taught me several other things, such as the love of outdoors, the love of dogs, and the love of family. And I still carry all of those with me today. My dad always kept in decent shape. He was a healthy family man. Each year on our camping trips, he hiked miles of trails. Over the weekend, during the winter, he, along with my brothers or whoever was around on the weekend, we would find a basketball court and we'd play full court basketball. And this was all the way up into his 60s. And I always thought, man, if I could have the same energy my dad did in his 60s, that would be great. He could just run up and down all weekend long. And this is just who my dad was. I don't think much of it because it's all I knew. Well, in 2009, something happened that I would never have expected. My dad had a heart attack. This healthy 65-year-old, suddenly experienced his body failing for the first time. It was out of the blue for him and for all of us. And I remember getting a phone call about when it happened, and they told me that he was going into the hospital, he was okay, but he had to have a stent put in, all of that. He had arteries clogged, I remember him dealing with high cholesterol earlier in life, and so it wasn't necessarily a huge surprise, but it did scare us for sure. Well, it was not too long after that more heart issues came up. My dad dealt with AFib, if you know what that is. Basically, your heartbeat gets out of rhythm, and I remember when this would happen to him, he couldn't hardly do anything. He was just out of energy all of the time. And keep in mind, this is the same dad, not too far removed from running up and down a basketball court, playing full court basketball with my brothers and I. Well, after many visits to the doctors, medications, my dad's overall health did continue to decline. Doctors learned that there was scar tissue on his heart that was preventing some normal functioning. Well, in September 2010, he went to Nebraska Heart in Lincoln for a planned heart surgery. The doctors found the problem to be worse than they had thought. While he was under, his heart stopped. Of course, this is the primary way for oxygen to be supplied to the brain. We had thought for a moment that he was gone. But thankfully, they got him going again. However, we did quickly find out after the fact, when he was awake, that he had lost so much of his short-term memory. I had never experienced this, so I'd have a conversation with him, and a few minutes later, he'd have no memory of what we just talked about. It was hard to watch my dad go through this. Well, luckily, this all seemed he seemed to improve with the memory function over the next few days, but still, the heart condition was still bad. It was not good for him. And in fact, when they were in there, we learned about a word of a diagnosis. The diagnosis he had was amyloidosis, and none of us had ever heard of this before. And I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly, but again, fast forward then, just a few months later, to what I would call one of my defining moments in my life. And this came on Christmas Eve of 2010. My dad went into cardiac arrest on Christmas Eve. He'd been struggling with a string of health issues, this amyloidosis diagnosis. Just real quickly, what I learned about amyloidosis is once they diagnose you, you have maybe six months, maybe 6 months. And yeah, that was hard. He'd been struggling with all sorts of health issues, and when I got the news about his cardiac arrest, we were here. We had just been finishing up Christmas Eve services, and I remember getting a phone call, and I did everything I could to get to Omaha, where he was, as fast as I could. When I arrived, found him at the hospital. He was on a ventilator, responsive, kind of, but pretty out of it. That next week was just a blur. It was, I don't remember all the details, but I remember being there. To try to bring some normalcy into the picture. All of us gathered in his hospital rooms on Christmas Day. We opened our presents. Felt weird, but again, we just tried to make sense of what was going on at the time. That was the best way we knew how. So we opened our presents, and that was okay. Over that week, I spent several nights with my dad and just sitting by his side, talking to him, even though I really wasn't sure what he could hear, what he understood from me. But I don't know, maybe that was more for me than it was for him. Doctor shared with us eventually that he was now fully reliant on his ventilator. And of course, this forced us into making a pretty big decision. So on New Year's Eve, I stayed at the hospital with him. It was his last night. And when the morning came, we made the decision, the very difficult decision, to take him off the ventilator. Within a few minutes, he eventually took his last breath. And in that moment, I knew everything was going to be different. If you're in this room, you have experienced your own story of grief. And maybe my story jostles you a bit. Before grief becomes real for any of us, I think for me it was I had experienced, losses. My grandparents passed away, but those seemed so different. I was a child when that happened, and grief was just this word out there. I didn't really understand what it meant until this moment. You see, grief hits us all in very different ways. At first, I was just trying to get through the immediate wave of grief any way I could. We had the funeral, we gathered with friends. We still felt the weight of the loss. And after the funeral, and after the people stopped showing up to bring meals, the phone calls slowed down, and everyone went home. I knew what I was feeling, but but honestly, that was just me. I couldn't imagine what my mom was going through at the time. She was experiencing her own type of grief, being alone for the first time in 40 plus years. There's a silence that exists that makes you question a lot. And this is where your year of first, I think, truly begins. This space we will just call the silence after the storm. You can probably feel that, the silence after the storm. Our world is just different. Our paradigm for how we see things is just different. I've spoken to countless people in the last couple decades who have lost someone that they love and have had to come to terms with this silence. And it's hard. It's in that silence is the first night where you really feel alone, maybe in your house. In the silence, you start realizing that things just sound different. They smell different. They are different. The year of first is just the beginning. It is all of these small things right off the bat, but then we get to more notable things along the way. In our case, my dad passed January 1st, 2011. His birthday was January 20th. He would have been 67 years old. So pretty young. And on that day, there were no joyful birthday calls. There were no celebrations. I remember the call I did make. It was to my mom. And it was just to let my mom know that I was thinking about her. From there, more family birthdays came and went, and they were different. visits, phone calls, everything. Everything had changed. Fast forward to the end of the next year, 2012. As Christmas season approached, the weight of it hit me all over again. Everything about Christmas just felt different. It was forever marked. Forever marked. It was no longer about celebrating, but it was, at least in that moment, it was marked with a loss. And maybe you felt that too with a holiday or an event. The first time you celebrate a birthday without them, the first time you sit at the Thanksgiving table and their chair is empty, the first time you wake up on an anniversary knowing they're not there. These first have a way of bringing grief right back to the surface and reminding you of the silence. You see, what the silence teaches us is the gravity of emptiness and isolation. That silence is heavy and can easily engulf a person. With each first, they can sink deeper and deeper into that abyss. And that is when I realized that I have a choice. I found myself between the weight of loss and God's desire for me to move forward. And I had to figure out what that even meant. I didn't know. Well, as I processed my own grief, I familiarized myself with anything that might just help make sense of it. I was just, grabbed for things. In this pursuit, nothing helped answer my grief in the way I had hoped or in the way I had maybe idealized in my own brain. It was as if I was trying to find a secret key to not feel what I was feeling anymore. When I realized that I was on the wrong pursuit, that is where I found a freedom that I had not yet felt. You see, it's not about becoming numb to pain. It is about allowing God to use our pain for his purpose. In my loss, I had to grow through a lot when it came to my relationship with my dad. So I'm gonna show a picture up here, Missy's gonna put up. And I want you just to look at this picture. This picture has helped me understand grief so much. And you might be thinking, what in the world does a bike and a tree have to do with grief? Well, let me tell you, because I want to share this with you. First, the story here. There's an old story of a bicycle that was left leaning against a young tree. Supposedly, that happened about 1954. A young boy was with his bike in the woods in the Pacific Northwest. And as a young boy might do, he may have seen something of interest, leaned his bike against a tree and wandered off and then just forgot about it. Kids do that. So maybe it was forgotten. But what we know was the bike never left that tree. Eventually, the boy moved away, leaving the memory of this bike behind. Days, weeks, months, and years went by. And just like you and I, the tree did the one thing it knew how to do. It kept growing. It kept growing. Over time, the tree absorbed the bike. The tree bark began to grow around its frame, and now, if you look at the tree, that bike, it's hard to tell from the picture, it's 7 feet off the ground. Just so you know, I'm 7 feet tall. The bike is still there, but it's forever a part of that tree's story. And, I think this is how grief works. It shows up like that bike unexpectedly. That bike and that tree were never meant to intersect, but they did. We do not ask for it. We do not want it. But when it comes, it marks us, and it becomes a weight to bear. And yet, because of the way God created us, how he created you and I, we are able to keep growing. The tree might have been thinking, oh, it'd be nice if someone could come and remove this bike from leaning on me. The tree doesn't think that. Instead, it did the very thing it was designed to do, grow. You see, grief does not stop us from growing or moving forward, but it does become a part of our story. We are permanently shaped by it, just like the tree was shaped by the bike. And here's where the hope lies. And I hope you see it in the picture, because God is in the business of redeeming stories. In my work here, I see it all the time. He is in the business of redeeming stories. He has a long history of making beauty from ashes. And it is okay to feel the weight of grief. The tree felt the weight, yet it adapted and it continued to grow and continued to strengthen. Like I've said already several times, everyone handles the weight of grief a little differently. The year of firsts come in different shapes and different sizes. So you don't have to compare your grief to somebody else's. It's all different. And no matter how it shows up, I want you to know that God's history of redeeming stories does not stop with yours. It does not stop with yours. He will continue to redeem your story and mine over and over and over again. I want to look at a couple Bible passages with you, and maybe to help us understand the greater purpose here. I have 3 Bible verses I'm going to look at right now. Psalm 34:18 says this: "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." Matthew 5, verse 4, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." And finally, Isaiah 41:10 says, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." So before I ask what you take from these verses, I want to ask you this. And this is a strange question. What is missing from these verses that you heard? The first many times actually, I thought through these verses. I didn't see it. But I kept on asking, okay, maybe there is something missing. Well, here's what it is. In any of these verses, we are never told grief will be taken away. That's what's missing. We're never told that grief will just one day be gone. Instead, we are told the Lord is close. We are told we will be comforted. We are told He will strengthen us. All of this assumes grief will always be present. So go back to the image of the tree for a moment. That tree did exactly what it knew to do. It did what God designed it to do, and that was grow. Even when the bike showed up, it never wavered from that purpose. And so when life gets in the way, you and I have been given a purpose. We have been designed in a certain way by God. Though sin, death, and destruction can often get in the way, if you have chosen Jesus, I want you to know that there is hope that is found in Him. That there is hope. We have a hope that is not from ourselves or our circumstances, that's important, or anything that we can create, but it is a hope that is found only in the person of Jesus. This is why we talk about every week our mission statement, that we can help lead you to the peace that Jesus offers. Because we know It's in Jesus that we have that hope. Grief is just a part of life. Like I said before, at one point it was just a word. I didn't know what it was. Now I do. And guess what? I'm not done learning yet. I know I'm not. My mom is aging, her health is declining. I'm spiritually, mentally, emotionally, I'm preparing myself for that day. So there is hope for us in the silence and in the storms. It is not if we will experience grief, it is when. When I'm working with families, planning funeral services, part of my job here, planning services for loved ones, I always want to focus my attention on bringing hope. And as Christ followers, our hope has been and will always be Jesus. And so my message is not for the one lost, but for those who are still alive. I like to say it this way. As a follower of Christ, I am a hope purveyor. Like, my main thing has got to be delivering hope, because that's what Jesus was about. We have the choice to grieve in the way the world does, or we can grieve with hope. And so let me read this passage to you. This comes from 1 Thessalonians 4:13. Paul writes this: "Brothers and sisters, we do not want you to be uninformed about those who sleep in death, so that you do not grieve like the rest of mankind who have no hope." You see, I know that there are times when grief feels unbearable. It can feel like you're stuck, unable to move on. And sometimes you might need to sit in that grief for a moment, for an hour, for a day, for a week. But as you walk through all of those firsts, there's something to hold on to. Here's what I want you to remember. The hope of Jesus Christ is eternal. Nothing else in this world is eternal, not even grief. James 4:14 reminds us that, says, "Why you do not even know what will happen tomorrow? What is your life? You're a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes." Yes, grief does leave a mark, and we do carry it, but it is not forever. The pain we feel today is momentary in the scope of eternity. Revelations 21:4 tells us this: "He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away." That is what we have to look forward to. So I look back now, 14 years later, after my dad passed, I look back at all those painful firsts that I walked through, and I see something different. I see that I'm not stuck in my own grief. I see that God did not want me to stay there. He has carried me forward. He has given me hope, and that is what He wants for you. Your grief is not limited to just a 5-stage process of grieving. In fact, even that we